Michael Warren met Stephanie in a college singing group and immediately found her extremely attractive. With long wavy chestnut hair, she was fair-skinned with just a sprinkle of sun-kissed freckles across her cheeks. She had a knockout figure with breasts that were neither too small nor too large. In high heels she stood slightly taller than his 5 feet 5 inches stature, but he didn't mind that at all. She was attracted to the fact that he was masculine without being macho. He had a slender build without being skinny and his face was smooth. She hated hairy men. He was a smart dresser without being trendy except for his pierced ears. He had done that on a bet with his buddies and just kept them that way when he found that the girls liked it. Since they had met in formal surroundings, she was always wearing skirts, blouses or dresses and always wearing high-heel pumps that accentuated her shapely legs. Being a leg man, he was extremely turned on by this and soon asked her out for coffee. They started going out after performances on a regular basis and inevitably fell in love. Not long after, they started living together and sharing a bed. Life was good for Michael. He had the woman of his dreams. She was smart, fun, witty and sexy. She could dress down for play days or dress up and turn heads wherever they went. He enjoyed her sexy look with every singing performance. They soon graduated from college and got married. The singing group was left behind as they joined corporate America. Michael joined a conceptual advertising firm as a frontman while Stephanie was hired into the photography department. Although they worked at the same company, Michael's occupation called for odd hours, so they drove 2 cars to work rather than carpool. Life was good for a while, but the honeymoon soon ended. It was then that Michael started noticing that Stephanie didn't dress in skirts or heels any other time than when she absolutely had to. Working in the photography lab where she had to don a lab coat 8 hours a day, she took to raiding his closet for his loose-fitting jeans, t-shirts and tennis shoes. Since they were virtually the same size, she reasoned, she could double her wardrobe without spending a dime. She joked that he was allowed to do the same to her clothes anytime he wanted. Dinner and dancing in clubs soon turned into Taco Bell and a video in the living room. He began to yearn for the days when they would dress up to go out. He missed the turn-on of seeing her long sexy legs in high heels. Soon the skirts, dresses and high heels ended up in the back of the closet, forgotten by Stephanie. The only time he would see her legs was in a flannel nightgown or the occasional loose pair of shorts. One day while sitting on the living room couch watching a video, Michael made the mistake of mentioning his thoughts to Stephanie. She immediately launched into a tirade of how he had no clue how hard it was to dress up like that and how uncomfortable heels were. She continued by saying that being a man, he couldn't have a clue to how much women had to put up with to look attractive. She finished by telling him that there was no way anyone was going to convince her to wear those again. She stormed out of the room, leaving Michael to a lonely night spent sleeping on the couch. That Friday, when leaving the office, Michael found a flyer on his windshield. It advertised a hypnotist who went by the name of Dr. Specs who was coming to the local nightclub. It went on to boast that he could make people do whatever he wanted them to do and convince anyone of anything. Sunday night found him sitting in the front row next to Stephanie, who was wearing a loose sweater, a pair of his jeans and flats. They were laughing at a man strutting around the stage like a chicken. As the man squatted to lay an egg, Dr. Specs looked over to Michael and started talking to him. "What's your name, sir?" "Michael," he answered. "And who is this charming lady sitting next to you?" he continued. "This is my wife, Stephanie." Dr. Specs looked at her. "No, she isn't, Michael. She's now an exotic dancer with a thing for chickens." Immediately Stephanie jumped up on stage and started dancing sexily around the man who thought he was a chicken. The crowd applauded wildly. Dr. Specs had hypnotized Stephanie without her knowing it. He had read about things like this happening, but had never seen it for himself. The hypnotist soon brought several other people unwittingly hypnotized onto the stage and had them do things as well. After that, he sent everyone back to their seats saying that he would bring them out of their trances right before the show ended. Michael got an idea. Leaning over to his wife, he whispered in her ear, telling her to go out to the lobby until the show was over. She immediately got up and walked out the door. She was not present when Dr. Specs brought everyone around. After the show, he gathered up their belongings and took Stephanie backstage to Dr. Specs. After a $100 bill exchanged hands and a brief explanation of his wants, Michael said, "Honey, Dr. Specs is going to take you into his dressing room and talk to you for a little bit. He's going to bring you out of your hypnotic trance, okay?" Without a word, she followed Dr. Specs into his office. Michael sat down in a chair right outside the door and settled in to wait. Through the thin dressing room he heard the hypnotist start speaking to wife, sending her even further under. Immediately, he got very sleepy, he awoke the next morning. Stephanie, as usual, was still asleep and probably would be for at least another hour to hour and a half. Kissing her gently on the cheek, Michael undressed and walked into the bathroom with a happy, knowing smile. He showered, dressed and groomed himself with thoughts of once again seeing Stephanie in short skirts and high heels swimming through his head. He walked into the kitchen, poured himself a bowl of cereal and sat down to read the paper while he ate. A few minutes later, he heard Stephanie pad into the room. Her hair was a morning time mess and the long t-shirt, sweats and mismatched gym socks she wore made for a fashion police stop if ever there was one. She stopped cold, staring at him with a dumbfounded look on her face. Michael looked up from his paper and started talking before she could say a word. "Honey, I've been thinking. It seems all you wear these days is the same old jeans, loose shirts and tennis shoes. You don't dress like a girl anymore. I really miss seeing you dressed up. You seem to have forgotten your feminine side." Uncrossing his legs, he stood and walked over to her. Looking down into her eyes, he ran a fingernail down her upper chest. "Would you do something different for work today for me? Why not put on that little black dress with the matching jacket, some pantyhose and those black suede pumps that I like so much?" He leaned in and gave her a short kiss on the lips. "It would really turn me on." "I'd love to," she dryly said in reply, "but I can't." He brushed his hair out of his face and asked, "Why?" "Because you're already wearing them," she said. Michael suddenly noticed the smell of perfume coming off his body and the trace of lipstick on Stephanie's lips from when he kissed her. He quickly walked across the hardwood kitchen floor, heels clicking to the front door where he stood in front of a full-length dressing mirror. Staring back at him, mouth slightly agape, was a slim woman with short but femininely styled chestnut hair wearing a form-fitting black dress that zipped up the back. Its sweetheart neckline revealed just enough chest to be feminine without being risque, and the hemline rose a few inches above the knees where it flared out to emphasize the legs. The matching jacket sported shoulder pads. It was cut at the midsection to accentuate a small waist where it was snugly closed with two large buttons. The nude pantyhose shone and gave nice curve and tone to smooth hairless legs that ended in 4-inch black suede pumps with stiletto heels. An ankle bracelet went around his left leg. Earrings graced his ears and a golden bracelet adorned his left wrist. Michael stared for a few seconds in silence while Stephanie quietly walked up behind him. "You want to tell me what's going on, hon?" she asked. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he said dumbly. He licked his lips, tasting the lipstick and smelling the foundation that covered his smooth skin. "What wasn't supposed to happen?" Stephanie asked. "I had Dr. Speck give you a post-hypnotic suggestion last night to make you want to wear skirts and heels again. I have no idea how I ended up like this," said Michael, voice quavering. He turned in his heels and faced her. Her face was an angry mask. "Are you trying to say that you had that quack try to make me do something I didn't want to do?" she said. "Don't you know that when you hypnotize someone, you can't make them do anything they really don't want to do? Did you really think that would work?" "Well, how are you feeling about wearing skirts and heels right now?" he said with a lopsided grin, cocking his hip and fiddling with a long fingernail. His slip rustled under the fabric of his dress. "I still hate them. I only wore them when I had to. If I didn't ever have to look at another dress, skirt, blouse or high heel in my life, I would be happy." She looked away for a moment then turned back. "But that still doesn't explain this," gesturing to Michael standing there in his wife's clothing. Michael looked down at his smooth, nylon-clad legs that ended in sexy pumps. "I don't know what happened," he said quietly. The last thing I remember last night was sending you into the room with Dr. Speck. I sat down in a chair outside the door to wait. Then I heard him talking to you. Then it was morning and I was dressed like this." He gestured to himself, wafting the scent of perfume into his nose. Stephanie leaned against a nearby door jamb, brushed a curl out of her face and started to giggle. "He did it to you instead." "Did what to me instead?" Michael said. "He hypnotized you into making you want to wear skirts and heels instead of me," she said, gripping her midsection as she broke into peals of laughter. "No way. Not me. This was just a joke on his part. I'm sure of it." He started to walk confidently to their bedroom, his skirt swaying back and forth with each step. "Nice shake on the backside, honey," snickered Stephanie. "I can't even walk that sexy in those shoes and I've had them for years." He made an obscene finger gesture over his shoulder as she followed her feminized husband to their room. "And what a wonderful manicure you have as well." He angrily sat down on the bed and proceeded to kick the shoes off his feet. They went flying toward her side of the closet. He had just stood and was unbuttoning his jacket when he doubled over as if he had just been gut-punched. Stephanie was immediately at his side, holding him in a second, asking what was wrong. "I don't know. I suddenly have intense stomach cramps." Moaning, he lowered himself, with her help, to her side of the bed, where he immediately curled up into a fetal ball and moaned. Stephanie looked at Michael and replayed the last few seconds in her mind. Inspiration struck like a light turning on in her head. Walking over to the closet, she retrieved the black suede pumps and put them back onto her husband's nylon feet. The high-heeled slippers fit as if they were made for him and him alone. Immediately, his breathing slowed and he relaxed. Michael looked at Stephanie and then sat up, crossing his legs in the short dress to preserve his modesty. He unconsciously pointed his toe in the shoes, giving his calves a shapely curve. "What's going on?" he asked her. "I want to try something." "Try to take off your jacket," she said. He tentatively unbuttoned the garment and took it off, revealing bare arms. There was no reaction. "Now try to remove the dress." He reached back and started to unzip the dress. Immediately, his face went pale and he inhaled sharply. She quickly re-zipped the dress for him and he returned to normal. Stephanie went to her closet and pulled out a white blouse, a blue leather skirt and matching leather pumps. She said, "I want you to change into these clothes right now." "I don't want to change into those clothes. I'm a man. I'm not consciously going to wear women's clothes." Michael said. "Knowledge is half the battle. Just do it," his wife commanded, handing him the clothing. Without any pain, he slipped off the shoes and stepped out of the dress, briefly revealing the padded bra that gave him the illusion of small breasts protruding from his chest. He started to feel a little queasy until he picked up the blouse and buttoned it up. The leather skirt came next, zipping it up the back. When Michael stepped into the leather pumps, an audible sigh of relief came out and a smile bespeaking pure pleasure appeared on his face. The man then stood meekly with his high-heeled feet together while his wife walked slowly around him, examining him from all angles. She walked back to the closet and grabbed a pair of flats. Handing them to him, she told him to try them on. He stepped out of the heels and donned the other shoes. As he did so, his face took on a greenish tinge as he stood before her. She told her husband to put on the heels again. He quickly did as he was told. The pleasure was evident on his face. "I'm just guessing, but it seems that you've been conditioned to wear the most feminine clothing you can. If you don't, you get physically ill. It also seems that as long as you know you're going to changing from one outfit to another, you're all right." Stephanie looked darkly at Michael. "Is this what you had planned for me?" Michael smiled weakly and explained that he had asked Dr. Spex to encourage her to wear more feminine clothing on a regular basis. He also asked to give her an incentive as well. He had suggested a feeling of pleasure whenever she wore skirts and heels. "Interesting to say the least, oh honeyfied hubby of mine," she said with a smile. "So what are we to do with you?" "We need to get back to the club and see Dr. Spex as soon as possible so he can remove this from me," Michael said. "Fine by me. Get dressed and we can go anytime you're ready." Oh, I forgot. You can't wear normal men's clothes, can you? She said sarcastically. I guess you're just going to have to go like this, aren't you? Michael turned visibly white and his knees gave out. He sat hard on the bed, knees together. I can't go out like this. What will people think? That you have great legs and heels. She gave a short laugh. Stephanie turned and proceeded to the kitchen. Oh well, I guess you can stay that way. She sat, picked up the paper and proceeded to eat Michael's soggy cereal. Michael followed her into the kitchen, sat in the chair next to her and begged, "Please help me. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted you to be a little more like the person you were when I met you. I was always this person. You should have known that," said Stephanie. Michael's eyes began to fill with tears. She never could stand to see him cry. Oh, all right. I'll help. Just stop crying. You're going to run your mascara and we'll have to do your makeup all over again. She stood up and started into the bedroom. Give me a minute to get dressed. What a girly man you are when the high-heeled shoe is on the other foot. Dash equals Stephanie quickly dressed in a pair of Michael's loose-fit jeans, his favorite comfortable polo shirt, a pair of gym socks and Nikes. She decided to forego any makeup. She then held out the black outfit to Michael. Hey, why do I have to change again? What do I look like, a Barbie doll? He complained. No, Barbie has a smaller waist and bigger boobs than you, but we're going to fix that right now. I'm telling you to wear the black outfit because it should help you to blend better in a crowd, she answered as she rummaged through her side of the closet. Michael unbuttoned the blouse and removed it. The satiny lining of the blue leather skirt caressed his nylon-clad legs as he stepped out of the garment. He left the blue pumps on his feet since having them on seemed to reduce the sickly feeling. He stood as still as possible as his wife laced him into the very same corselet that she had worn under her wedding dress on their wedding day. His waist immediately lost 4 inches and his hips took on new curves. She then turned to the bottom of her lingerie drawer and pulled a pair of small silicone breast pads from an enhancer bra she ordered from Fredericks of Hollywood. She placed them in her husband's padded bra cups, giving them a slightly larger, more natural look. Well, you're no Pamela Anderson, but you'll look no different from any other average woman who wishes she did, she said. She sat on the bed and crossed her legs like a man. Why don't you finish getting dressed? Aren't you going to get dressed up like me? I mean, it would help me fit in, wouldn't it? Said Michael. I don't have to, remember? And someone has to wear the pants in this family, she smirked. Besides, I kind of like the idea of this role reversal thing we've got going here. She put one of his baseball caps on her head. Come on. I'm waiting, you big sexy hunk of woman, you. I don't know if I can do this, whined Michael as he stood by the front door. He was wearing his wife's sunglasses. It's the only way we can get you back to the club, she replied as she stuffed her chestnut hair up under the cap. Here, she said as she removed her wedding ring, take my ring. It'll do us no good for someone to see you wearing such a masculine piece of jewelry. She removed his band and pocketed it while putting her diamond solitaire on his finger. Opening the door, she handed him a purse with both their belongings in it, partially bowed and made a "you first" gesture. Shall we? His high heels clicked loudly on the concrete walkway as they made their way to the car. The breeze touched his long legs and played with the flared hem of his dress. The path had never seemed so long him. He was just about to walk to the passenger side of their compact car when he heard Sam, a neighbor a few houses down and across the street, call out, Hey Steph, love the new do. Short hair looks great on you. He was washing his motor home. He pointed the hose toward his grass. It's been a while since we've seen you dress up, gal. By the way, I gotta tell you this. You have got some great gams. You ought to show those off more often. Michael waved weakly as Stephanie held the door open for him. She giggled all the way around to the driver's side. The radio was playing Aretha Franklin as they drove down the freeway. Michael sat, legs crossed, in the passenger's seat trying to look inconspicuous. Oh, come on. Stop acting so nervous. No one is going to notice you here on the road. If anyone were to recognize you as a man in a dress, it would have been Sam. He knows you. She glanced over. You passed. She put her hand on his knee and rubbed it. She saw Michael inhale sharply and stiffen, then immediately relax, enjoying the moment. A small grin spread across her face. She did it again. Like that, do ya? She asked. He answered in a panting, shuddery voice. Uh-huh. I guess. I do. She slowly ran her hand up down his calf and then back up his upper thigh, feeling the silky smoothness of the hose on his shaven leg. His back arched slightly, his breathing increased, and an involuntary moan escaped his painted lips. Well, given your reactions to my touch, I'm almost sorry that the hypnotism didn't work on me. You really seem to be enjoying this, she said. He answered by merely turning his head, letting out another small squeak of pleasure and crossing his legs the other way so that she could caress the other. Barking out a short laugh, she ran her hand slowly up that one as well. Stephanie walked around the car, paused to take in her bearings on the building, and then opened the door for Michael. He was putting up the sunshade. He swiveled his skirted rear and swung his legs out the door together like a lady. Where did you learn that? Said Stephanie with a smile. I didn't grow up under a rock. I had a little sister, and before I met you. You both used to wear skirts at one point in your lives, he answered as he straightened his jacket and smoothed his dress. But at least my sister has a decent excuse for not wearing skirts anymore. What's that? She's a butch lesbian, he deadpanned as he shouldered his purse and started for the club door. Stephanie scowled at her husband's back and proceeded to follow his confident, yet definitely feminine strides. As they entered the dark club, Michael walked to the bar and had a seat on one of the high stools near the door. The only light source of any consequence came through the glass double doors. He unconsciously sat up straight, crossed his legs and pointed his toe, placing his hands in his lap and looking out the window. Stephanie remained standing until a balding man in a red polo shirt and black slacks approached them. She met him halfway. Hi there. I'm Dino, the manager. Can I help you two ladies? I'm not interviewing for the server positions until 1, he said. Although he spoke to Stephanie, his eyes were on her companion sitting on a bar stool. The light coming through the doorway behind Michael made him a comely silhouette. We're not here for a job, she said quietly. We're here to see Dr. Specs if he's not busy. I'd love to help you out, ma'am, but he's not here, he replied. When will he be back? We can wait if that's okay with you, Stephanie said. Dino shifted his stance, looking over at the lady on the bar stool. He couldn't help but stare at her shapely legs. That might be a problem. You see, Dr. Specs left last night after the show. It was his last appearance for this year's tour. He's taking the next few weeks off. Word is that he's out of the country. He's storing his stuff here till gets back into town. He'll be coming back here to pick it up. He glanced at Stephanie apologetically and then returned his gaze to those legs. What's the problem? Maybe I can help you. No, said Stephanie, this is one for the doc himself. It's going to take a specialist to fix this problem. What? Your girlfriend stay hypnotized into thinking she's a chicken? He laughed. Stephanie smiled and said, not quite, but we will need to see Dr. Specs personally. She borrowed a pen from him and wrote her phone number on a handy beverage napkin. Please pass this on to him as soon as he returns. It's very important. Sure, anything, he said, still looking at the good-looking woman at the bar wearing the high heels. Say, I know it's kind of forward and all, but they say that you should strike while the iron is hot. Is your, friend, single? She sure has a great body and really sexy legs. Stephanie smiled and took a step closer to him and ran a finger down Dino's chest. You want to date my friend over there, eh? Do you really think she's sexy? She said. Oh yeah, he said, practically drooling with a silly grin on his face. Well, that's going to be a little tough, Dino, said Stephanie, gathering up her companion on the way to the door, because you see, the sexy little kitten with the great gams here is my hypnotized husband. Please see that the doc calls. She smiled sweetly over her shoulder, took her husband's manicured hand and walked out as a slack-jawed Dino watched them leave. Stephanie was laughing so hard she could barely drive down the road. "What did you say to him in there? Remember how you said you were afraid what people would say if they saw you dressed this way?" "Yes. The manager wanted to know if you were single. He said you have a great body and sexy legs." Stephanie broke into peals of laughter again, almost swerving into oncoming traffic before she righted them. Michael blushed fiercely, tightened his painted lips for a second and then asked, "What about the hypnotist? When do we go back? This afternoon?" Stephanie sobered for a moment then quietly replied, We don't." "What?" "We don't," she said. Dr. Speck's last show of this year's tour was last night and now he's gone on vacation. He won't be back for weeks." "Weeks?" Michael shouted. "I can't stay like this for weeks. I've got to go to the office. I'm in the middle of a multi-million-dollar deal right now that could put us on easy street. I can't afford to take any time off. I shouldn't have even called in sick today." He huffed and looked out the passenger's side window while he crossed his nyloned legs the other way and started kicking his stiletto-heeled foot. He clasped his purse on his lap even tighter. "Well, let's get home and see what kind of limitations we have to deal with," said Stephanie. They drove for a few moments in silence. "You know, this isn't my fault. If you hadn't been so darn selfish and tried to pull that dirty little stunt, you wouldn't be in this situation at all." He relaxed visibly then sighed, admitting defeat. "I know." He put his purse on the floor of the car and started playing with his skirt hem. "I'm sorry, Steph. It was wrong of me to do this. I know that now. It's all right, honey. We'll figure out a way to get by," she said understandingly as she rubbed his arm through the shoulder pads of the jacket. After a moment, he looked up coquettishly through his mascara-brushed lashes. "Did he really say I had sexy legs?" They giggled the rest of the way home. After their uneventful return home, Stephanie marched Michael straight to the bedroom where she began to methodically have her husband dress in all her blouses, dresses, skirts and heels, seeing what fit and what didn't. She reasoned that he couldn't wear just one outfit until Dr. Speck's came back. He responded unhappily at first, then with growing enthusiasm as time went on. She could see his hypnotically pre-programmed pleasure growing with each outfit he's changed into. After Michael had tried on virtually every stitch of clothing Stephanie owned, "It seems that with the waist cincher you have an even smaller figure than I do. My clothes seem to look even better on you than on me," she said. She handed him a pair of black high-waist cut ladies' slacks saying, "Here, try these." "Pants?" he asked, sounding almost disappointed. He was currently wearing a white denim miniskirt and matching pumps with 3-inch heels. "Remember work? Although you look very cute in my skirt, my little macho man, you've still got to go there and finish that deal," she replied. "I'm hoping to find something for you to wear. What about you? You think that people are going to take you serious wearing that?" "Good point." He took the slacks. She continued rummaging through the room. The pants were pleated, zipped up the back and had no pockets. It sported a thick false belt at the waist designed to show off a small waist. He stepped into them while still wearing hose and heels. He had changed into a simple blouse she had given him. Its scooped neckline showed a modest amount of chest accentuating his breasts. He fastened the belt around his waist and walked around the room catching his reflection in the mirror. "Hey, these aren't half bad." It gave the illusion of a long feminine waist and smooth rounded hips. Without thinking, he did a model turn, examining himself at all angles, pausing to look at his backside. He quickly walked to his closet and selected out one of his own black sports coats. Putting it on and buttoning it, he returned to the mirror. "Aside from the heels and hose, I don't look all that bad. The cut of the coat hides the fact that these are ladies' pants." "Good. It looks like you might be able to go to work after all," said Stephanie. "Just don't let anyone see your feet and you should be able to do your job." "In the meantime," she said while getting up and moving slowly toward him with a smile, "there's one last outfit for you to try on." She handed him one of 2 bags. "Put this on and come out when you're ready. Okay?" She caressed his cheek and then gave him a feather-soft kiss. "See you soon." After she had exited the room and went into the hall restroom, he opened the bag. Inside was a black floor-length silk gown. It had spaghetti straps and a plunging neckline lined with lace. A high-cut slit allowed for a lot of leg to show when its wearer walked. A black satin waist cincher with garters, stockings, and panties were also included. To complete the outfit, he found a pair of matching 4-inch mules with a small handwritten note attached to them. "Dearest Michael, as I watched you trying all my clothes tonight, I found myself becoming more and more interested in your reactions. I'm sorry that this has happened, but it seems that we've found a side of you that we didn't know existed. Why not explore it? They say that you can't be hypnotized into doing anything you don't really want to do. Maybe there's a little part of you that really enjoys this and craves the experience of wearing women's clothes and high heels. I had originally bought this outfit for you, but after seeing you wear my clothes today, I think I might cut out the middleman and give it directly to you. I've been saving it for a special occasion. What better occasion than now? If you thought what I did for you in the car felt incredible, you haven't got a clue how good you're going to feel after you come out wearing this. I've left appropriate makeup and other accessories on my dresser. See you soon, lover." Steph. He looked onto the table and saw foundation, powder, eyeshadow, blush, lipstick, eyeliner, and mascara, as well as matching jewelry. There was even scented body powder as well as a bottle of Stephanie's favorite perfume. He had originally bought it for her because he liked it so much, but she didn't wear it very often anymore. He smiled. "I guess if she won't wear it I will," he thought. He sat down and got to work. When he emerged from the bedroom, the house was dark, save for the soft glow of candlelight radiating out of the living room. He had curled his bangs just a bit to make them a little more feminine. Glitter in his hair glinted in the moonlight and the scent of perfume rose from his neck. On a whim he had located a pair of tweezers and thinned his eyebrows just a bit as well. Not enough to be noticeable to the casual glance, but enough to work with an eyebrow pencil. Long black earrings that reflected the pale light hung gracefully from his ears. The cool satin played against his legs as he walked. The mules he stood and gave him a feeling of femininity that he could hardly describe, but could definitely feel. He had even found a pair of shoulder-length satin evening gloves from an old Halloween costume and put them on. As he had applied his makeup in the bedroom, the pleasurable feelings that scorched through his body had caused him to orgasm twice. Thankfully he had not put on his nightgown yet, but the other pair of pantyhose and underwear would have to be washed before anyone could wear them again. He felt in control of himself again for the time being. He hoped. Michael started walking quietly on his toes, feeling a little self-conscious, but then realized that Stephanie was expecting him, and darn it, he looked good and felt sexy. He took a more confident stride, placing one high-heeled foot directly in front of the other and putting a little sway in his hips. He stopped abruptly. "What's happening to me?" he thought to himself. "Why am I enjoying wearing women's clothes so much?" "Is that you, lover?" he heard Stephanie say in a bedroom voice. Soft romantic music floated out of the living room. "Hurry. I can't wait to see you and give you pleasure." His hand automatically came up to where satin met chest. He slowly lowered it down his torso, tracing the contours of his feminized body. The cool smoothness of the sexy gown and knowledge that he was the one wearing it sent electricity through him. Any negative thoughts that had just run through his mind were instantly forgotten. He looked down and saw a vase of roses he had bought for her earlier that week. In the bouquet was a little baby's breath. He broke a small sprig off and placed it delicately behind his ear. He smiled to himself and stepped slowly through the doorway into her presence. She was standing at the other side of the room in front of a bay window, candles lining the sill. She was wearing a white gown reminiscent of a 1940s glamour dress. It was almost a perfect match with its low neckline and thin straps, but instead of a slit up the leg, the floor-length gown expanded, draping gracefully around her well-turned ankles. She wore mules as well. The candles around her created a faint halo around the edges of her hair and in the twin sparkles of her eyes. "You look beautiful," they both said at the same time. "Thank you," they said in unison once more. They shared a nervous laugh and looked away from each other for a moment. It was an awkward moment. Stephanie broke the tension. "I love the glitter and flowers in your hair," she said quietly. The evening gloves were a nice touch. "Thank you," said Michael nervously. He ran his gloved hand down the other arm and then stood straight. Coyly looking down at the hardwood floor, he said, "I thought you might, like it." He adjusted his weight to his other leg and placed one leg slightly in front of the other. His thigh and calf peeked sexily out of the slit in the gown. "I hope you don't mind me dressing up too. I figured you deserved a little something after the day you've had," she said. Would you like to sit down?" "Sure." They both started to walk to the couch, high heel shoes clicking. Stephanie reached the couch before Michael and sat down. As the man reached the couch, she said, "Wait." He stopped, motionless. "Turn around in a slow circle. I'd like to see you." He did as he was told to do, turning on his toes. The satin gown flared just enough to part, allowing a view of his nylon-clad legs. "You've got gorgeous legs in high heels, you know that?" She smiled at her words. "I never pictured myself saying those exact words to my husband." He quietly laughed as well, running his hand under his backside as he settled onto the couch close to her. As he crossed his legs, the high-cut slit fell away from his legs, revealing a generous portion of smooth thigh. "That nightgown really becomes you. It's a wonder we didn't think of this long ago," she said, taking her husband's gloved hand. They leaned toward each other slowly and inexorably, both searching for clues to the other's thoughts. They paused right before touching, tentative and uncertain. Then their painted lips met and her hand slid up his bare shoulder to cradle the back of his neck. Their two perfumes joined to create a new scent that set them aflame with desire. As they kissed, Michael slid his foot from its high-heel shoe and began to run it up and down his wife's leg. She responded with a moan of pleasure, drinking in his kiss. Her hands seemed to take on a life of their own as they gently explored the curves of his feminized form. Their bodies entwined in a slow dance of passion. Suddenly, as if by some unseen force, the two visions of femininity parted, eyes never leaving one another. They slowly stood and, holding hands, made their way into the bedroom. They shut the door behind them. The candles burned themselves out in a few hours. The next morning, Michael awoke within a slight haze. He sat up on the edge of the bed and looked down. He was wearing the white nightgown. He smiled and stepped into the white mules. The black ones were gone anyway. He ran a brush through his hair and then made his way to the kitchen, where he found his wife sitting with her legs crossed at the table drinking coffee. It was her turn to show leg. Leaning over her, he gave her a lingering kiss, then poured himself some coffee. "Sleep well, dear?" she asked. "Like never before," he answered, still smiling. He ran his hands across the smooth fabric of the gown. "I never realized these were so soft and comfortable. If I had known, I would have worn them a long time ago." "It's a secret we girls keep from you men," she said with an impish smile. "So are you ready to get macho again and go to work?" "Oh yeah. The real world." "Yuck," he said. "I guess so. I'll call them and let them know I'm going in a little late. That way there won't be so much foot traffic in the lobby. It will allow me to slip in a little more quietly. Although I'll be wearing pants, there's no way I can hide my footwear, if you know what I mean." He lifted his leg to show off painted toenails peeking out from the white mules. "Well, if you gotta go, you might as well go with some style." She put down the paper and stood. She put her hand on his neckline. "Honey, let's make a man out of you." Michael stood nervously in front of the main double doors. He was hiding his shoes behind a trash container. "I'm going to go in first," said Stephanie. "You follow me by a few feet. I'll distract Mac while you casually walk by to the elevators. Call me when the doors open and I'll join you." "Sounds like a plan." He gave her the thumbs up with his right hand and then realized that he still had long, painted nails. He quickly made a fist with his free hand and grasped his briefcase in such a way as to hide the manicured digits. Stephanie smiled at him, gave him a kiss on the cheek and walked confidently up to the security desk. "Hiya, Mac," she said to the elderly security guard as she leaned on the counter. "Oh, hey dear, Miss Steph," he said, greeting her with a brilliant smile on his broad dark face. He put down his newspaper and donut as he faced her. "How are you these days? Don't seem that folks get to take much time to be social these days. It's a cryin' shame, don't you think?" "It sure is," she replied, looking very concerned. She launched into a story about the hypnotist show that she and her husband had recently seen. She was babbling on about people doing ballet and laying eggs as Michael entered the lobby and walked by as casually as he could manage. The click of his shoes on the tiled lobby floor seemed to boom in his ears. He was absolutely positive that everyone would notice the resulting explosions from every step he took in the stiletto heels. He pictured in his mind people pouring out from the offices and cubicles to search out the source of the sounds, only discover it was their top-closing salesman wearing his wife's high-heeled footwear. He stiffly raised his hand and mumbled a greeting to the guard as he passed near. He was engrossed in the story Stephanie was telling, happy for the attention. He absently raised a hand in return. Turning the corner, he finally reached the elevator bay where 8 cars could arrive at any time. Any time, of course, except when you're in a major hurry. The wait was interminable. Down the hallway, a couple of men in shirts and ties emerged from a hallway. Michael froze, terror creeping into every limb, but they turned the other way and didn't notice him. He was startled by the ding of an arriving car. "Honey, the elevator is here," he called. In mid-sentence, Stephanie aborted her rambling story. "Sorry, Mac. Gotta go," she said, then bounded around the corner, leaving the old guard chuckling and shaking his head. Kids. == Michael closed the blinds in his office windows and had been working behind his desk for a couple hours, legs crossed and toe pointed, before the stomach cramp started. He tried to put it out of his mind, but it soon became too insistent to ignore. He knew just what it was. The slacks were only a temporary fix. He needed to get out of these pants and get back into a skirt right now. But what could he do? He was at work. There was nowhere to go to get one. A major cramp bent him over double, sending him moaning to the floor. Then he got an idea. He stood and straightened himself as best as he could, then staggered to the door. His high heel pumps did not help him stay vertical very easily. Leaning on the jamb, he opened the door just enough for his head to peek through. "Melissa? Would you come in here, please?" He hurried back to his desk as best as he could. The young, shapely administrative assistant entered the office with a sheaf of papers in her hands. She was slender and curvaceous with full blonde hair and green doe eyes. Normally Michael enjoyed staring at her body, but right now he was focused only on the clinging deep brown Angora dress with black highlights that she was wearing. "What can I do for you, Mike?" "Hey, you don't look so good." She approached the desk. "Is there something I can do to help you? An aspirin? Tums? Maalox?" "Your dress," he said without preamble. "Excuse me? I need your dress right now," he said urgently. Realizing how he must sound, he tried to straighten himself in his chair in spite of the racking pain kneading at his midsection. He blurted, "It's for a ad pitch idea that I just got. Your dress is the perfect thing that I need to wear, need for where I'm going with the idea. I don't want to have to go shopping to reproduce it. That would just waste time that we don't have." "Well," she said, "I'll compensate you for the clothes. Say $100? $200, he practically shouted. He had broken out in a cold sweat and spots were beginning to appear before his eyes. "All right, I suppose. I have some workout clothes in my desk and fine. Just hurry and get that dress back to me ASAP. He flung 2 bills from his wallet in her general direction and curled up as best as he could on his chair, almost exposing his shoes. Confused, she picked up the money and walked out of the room. In 5 minutes, she had changed into stretch pants, a tank top and cross trainers, then returned to his office with the dress over her arm. Michael practically tore it out of her hands and pushed her out of the office, saying that she was to take messages only and not to disturb him for the rest of the afternoon. As the door closed, Melissa caught a glimpse Michael removing his jacket and tie as fast as he could, his eyes riveted on her dress. She marveled at the strangeness of men. Breathing much easier, Michael had his feet up on his desk admiring his smooth, shapely legs in the dark nylon that massaged them. He had donned his secretary's clothes just in time. It wouldn't have gone well for him if someone had discovered him passed out on his office floor wearing nothing but a waist cincher, bra, pantyhose and black suede pumps. He stood and crossed the carpeted office to the mirror he kept on his office door. Image was important when you were a salesman. Right now, however, his image was important for a totally different reason. The soft black angora caused shivers of pleasure wherever it touched. It had a modest V-cut neckline and a hem that ended almost 4 inches above his knees. It buttoned up the back and seemed to hug his every curve. Women had it so much better in the clothing department, he thought as he ran his hands over his body. He rubbed his legs together as waves of pleasure coursed through him. This was definitely a yummy feeling. It was another secret girls kept from men. If men really knew about how good it felt to wear clothes and shoes like this, women would become obsolete as pleasure bringers. His phone rang, bringing him out of his revelry. He quickly crossed the room, picking up the phone and sat down. He unconsciously ran his hand under his rear to smooth his skirts and crossed his legs. He got a lot of work done that afternoon. I noticed you weren't wearing your slacks and jacket when you came home. What happened? Said Stephanie. They were both curled up with their feet on the couch. They were leaning close to each other, knees touching, like high school girls. She wore a sweatshirt, stretch pants and slouch socks while he had opted for an acid-wash stretch denim miniskirt, gray long-sleeve bodysuit, nude pantyhose and the black mules he had worn the before hoping to remind her of the previous night's passion. He had also put on a full face of makeup and gold hoop earrings, stating that it just didn't seem natural to be dressed like this without going all the way. He also smelled softly of his favorite perfume. The pants seemed to only work for a little while, he replied. He explained what had happened earlier that afternoon and described his close call with Melissa. He showed her the dress he had bought from his secretary. Very pretty, but not very masculine. How did you get out of there? She asked. It wasn't easy. I had to wait till almost everyone had left the office and then make a break for the stairwell. Do you know how hard it is to go down 12 flights of stairs in heels? They both laughed. Now I've got to figure out an ad idea using this dress. $200 is a little high, but not too bad considering the quality of the material. And you looked really good in it. Can I borrow it sometime? She asked. Anytime you want. Either way, I don't think that pants trick is going to work again. He shifted his bottom on the couch and readjusted his feet. He looked up quickly, making his earrings swing back and forth against his smooth neck. Steph, can I ask you a question? Anything. What's it like to be a woman? He asked tentatively. I can't believe you're asking me this, she said with a smile. I mean, have you looked at yourself in the mirror lately? Here I sit, my hair tied in a raggedy ponytail, no makeup, sweats and socks while you're dressed in a sexy little skirt, a low-cut bodysuit, pantyhose, high heels, makeup, and all the accessories that make it look yummy, and you're asking me what being a woman feels like? After just 2 days, you look better as a woman than I do. You're a babe. I think you know what I mean, hon, he said, a little exasperated. He smiled at her to soften the harshness of the statement and took her soft hand in his. He grew serious and a troubled look crossed his face. I've been getting these feelings all day long and my head has been filled with thoughts of how sexy women can be. As I sat in my office today, the only thing I could think about was what outfit I was going to change into when I got home today. He ran a hand lightly along his calf down to his ankle, enjoying the smooth texture of the nylon on his leg. I can only wonder if I would be having these feelings if I hadn't gotten hypnotized by Dr. Specs. You said in your note last night that a person can't be hypnotized into doing anything he doesn't really want to do, and that maybe there's a part of me that really wants to wear your clothes and high heels. He fingered the delicate golden ankle bracelet he was wearing. He had given it to her on their first wedding anniversary. I have to admit that these feelings scare me. Why? She asked. Because I think I may be really starting to like this. I shouldn't. I'm a man. Men don't wear Angora dresses and high heel shoes. But I am, and it makes me feel really good. Are you having thoughts about men? You know, like romantic thoughts about men? She asked. You know. I may look like a babe, but that doesn't mean I want to be a man's babe. Inside I'm still all man, he said, placing his fingertips against his breasts. He gently brushed his curled bangs out of his eyes. I still look at you and want to get under your skirt, but it seems that for the time being, it's going to have be while I'm wearing it. It's all because of the hypnotism, I'm sure. Stephanie assured him. I'm not. He replied quietly, looking down into his smooth lap. She placed a fingertip under his made-up chin. Hey, cheer up. Smile. Everything is going to be all right. We'll make it that way. I'll keep trying to find when Dr. Specs is supposed to return, and when he does, we can end all this. He looked up through his long, thick lashes and with pouting lips asked, Promise? Have I ever let you down before? No. Come on, she said, giving him a little kiss and standing. I'll give you a little encore performance of last night's show. Be gentle, he said, standing as well. He pressed his breasts up against her and said in an innocent voice, I'm just a little girl, you know. By the way, she said, taking his hand and leading him to the bedroom, did anyone notice that you're still wearing my wedding ring? The next week was spent waking before daybreak to duck into the office before anyone else arrived. Stephanie became an expert in distractions so Michael could get past Mac while wearing her overcoat. He became a hermit in his office, all human contact done through remote control and the phone lines. He had given instructions to Melissa to leave his day's work on her desk, where he would pick it up at the beginning of the day and return it at the end after she had left. He kept a sports coat, shirt and tie hanging over the back of his chair so that he could wear it over his blouse when he participated in video conferencing. Every evening was spent waiting for the office to empty. Michael would then grab his briefcase and purse and walk as fast as his high heels would allow him toward the stairwell next to the elevators. He only had one close call. Just as he had opened the stairwell that led to the parking garage one evening late that week, the elevator doors parted, releasing the cleaning crew. They were just stepping out of the car as he stepped through the doorway. He didn't think they saw his face, although they probably got a good look at his receding backside and legs, because one of them called after him, Have a good evening, ma'am. That weekend Michael decided to play a bit. He had gone rummaging in the back of the closet where most of Stephanie's forgotten clothes were. He now sat legs crossed, flipping through TV channels while wearing an evening gown he had found still in its dry cleaning bag. It was white satin, cut in a timeless style, form-fitting to the mid-thigh area where it flared out to allow walking. He wore a pair of white shimmer hose and matching satin pumps, the same pumps his wife had worn in their wedding. The thin shoulder straps flowed into a smooth zigzag neckline that came together into a V where it showed just a hint of his new cleavage. Earlier that week, with Stephanie's knowledge, Michael had made a very late-night visit to an adult bookstore in the area. The jaded cashier didn't even blink at him as he stood in his turtleneck, skirt and heels and requested and paid for silicone breast forms and a panty girdle to hide his male parts. He had adhered the breasts to his hairless chest as soon as he returned to his car, although he would start wearing the panty girdle the next day. He could feel the reassuring weight of the breasts in the cups of his bra, and he often absently ran his hand over them as he drove home that night. The two accessories now allowed him to enjoy curves he didn't even know he had. Stephanie walked into the room. She had opted for a comfortable t-shirt, denim shorts and Keds with bobby socks. She sat on the armrest of her husband's lazy boy. Looks like you're all dressed up with nowhere to go. Her husband looked up. His eye makeup was done in deep browns and golds, while the deep red of his lipstick invited kisses. The earrings he wore were made of 3 golden strands that hung free and caught the light with every movement he made. Each strand ended in a small freshwater pearl. I'm bored. I'm tired of sitting around this prison we call a house. I want to go out and do something, he whined. I wish we could go out dancing, but thanks to my condition that's not going to happen. Why not? She said. Hello? We can't go out anywhere around here with me dressed like this. Even if they don't recognize me, people are still sure to recognize you and put two and two together. So then we go someplace that's out of town. Listen, a girlfriend of mine knows a great little club about 45 minutes from here. It's far enough away that no one will recognize either of us. He flashed a brilliant smile at her and stood up on his heels. His slip swished against his legs, sending pleasure down his spine. Let's do it. Great. Just one more thing. Although you look gorgeous in that dress, it's not exactly made for dancing. Let's get changed and go have a good time. What do you say? As they started walking to the by the way, did I give you permission to wear my wedding shoes, honey? She sassed him. They were the only shoes that matched the dress, and as tight as it is, it's not like you're going to be wearing it anytime soon. He playfully poked her in the side. Bitch. They drove down the freeway with the radio blasting Guns N' Roses. Stephanie wore a tight red spandex dress with a low-cut chest. She wore red fishnet hose and matching red pumps. She had given herself wild woman hair and drawn out her eye makeup dramatically. Large red earrings jangled on the sides of her head. She laughed for the sheer joy of it. I had forgotten how good it feels to do this, she said. It's not my fault. I've been trying to get you to do this again for a long time, he smiled back at her. Her husband had chosen to wear a provocative, backless liquid gold dress that emphasized his long slender neck and short hair. The hemline rose high on his thigh while the plunging V neckline, revealing a healthy amount of cleavage, begged to be taken dancing. The nude pantyhose he wore reflected the light off of his smooth shapely legs as they drove down the road. His feet were in a pair of 3.5-inch bare leather strappy sandals that wrapped and tied up his crossed legs. The black leather spaghetti strings created a pattern on his calves. He had once again curled his bangs and used gold glitter in his hair while making his face a fashion plate. The scent of his perfume filled the car. Girlfriend, said Stephanie, you are guaranteed to catch eyes in this outfit. I hope you brought protection because I am not responsible for what happens to you tonight. They shared a laugh. Oh my, he said, a hand coming to his mouth. It never occurred to me to think of men. Do you think anyone will come up to me? In that outfit? You can bet on it, girl. What should I do if that happens? He said, starting to look worried. Don't worry. Remember, attitude is everything. If you act like you belong in that dress, and by your looks alone you do, people will believe that you're a natural woman. Besides, I think I have it covered well enough to keep the men off of you so that we can have a good time tonight, she replied. What have you got in mind? Easy. If a guy makes a pass at you, I'll just kiss you and tell them that we're lesbians. Pulling up to the valet parking station in front of the main doorway, a young man opened the door for Michael. Grasping his matching gold clutch purse, he swung his long legs together out onto the concrete. The attendant half bowed and held his hand out to help him out. He smiled, took it and gave it a little squeeze as he stood in the high heels. The young man's eyes widened as he took in Michael's body. A second uniformed attendant went around to the other side of the car to assist Stephanie. As he waited on the curb for his partner, a slight wind caught the fabric of Michael's golden dress. It didn't ruffle in the breeze so much as it flowed like molten metal over his curves. When Stephanie joined him, they began to make their way to the back of the long queue that snaked from the club door. Almost every man waiting in line stood and stared at the two beautiful women that approached them, while the women enviously took them apart with their eyes, knowing they didn't look anywhere near as good. Before they could get more than a few steps, the burly bouncer at the door waved them over and invited them in with no waiting and no charge. He said that women like them were few and far between and should be treated special. They smiled, thanked him for the compliment and then proceeded into the club where they danced the night away. On Monday afternoon, Stephanie finally tracked down the hypnotist's agent and gave a vague explanation as to what had happened to her husband. He informed her that he was to return home that Friday evening. He apologized for any problems that may have occurred due to the hypnotic suggestion and assured her that he would have the doctor call as soon as he arrived. The couple worked their daily schedule into a routine. She would engage Mac the guard in conversation while Michael snuck into the office building, then he would exit the building via the stairwell at the day's end. They would then meet somewhere for dinner, seduce each other, then go home, change into lingerie and engage in mad sex. The two had gotten so good at it, Michael had even gotten so bold as to curl his bangs and wear makeup and earrings on days that he didn't have any video conferencing scheduled. It seemed as though Michael's secret would be kept until Dr. Speck's return. On Friday, he had decided to wear the tight deep brown Angora dress with black highlights that he had purchased from his administrative assistant, Melissa, the week before. He thought it to be somewhat appropriate somehow. Stephanie had quipped that it was the only piece of clothing he truly owned. His face was fully made up and he wore smart black and gold earrings. He wore his wife's ankle bracelet once again. He stood admiring his feminine visage in front of the full-length mirror that hung from the back of his office door, smiling a wistful smile. His breasts made the entire look of the dress. He thought of the prosthetics as his own now. After all, he had bought and paid for them. Now he was experiencing mixed feelings regarding the fact that it was his last day to dress in his wife's clothing. Although things had started out badly and he had been unhappy about his predicament, he didn't feel that way now. He enjoyed his rounded feminine figure instead of his boring old flat male one. He was happily addicted to the smooth texture of the nylon pantyhose. He liked how sexy they made his legs look. He took pleasure at the sound his high heels made as he walked and the changed perspective of being 3 to 4 inches taller. He didn't know if he could go back to wearing the rough fabrics that men's clothes were typically made from. After 2 weeks in silk, satin and lace, how could he return to rough cotton? Men didn't get very much choice in the clothes they wore. Oh sure, they could wear different colors and fabrics, but it was always a choice of pants or short pants. They could wear a t-shirt or a button-up collared shirt. A guy could wear tennis shoes or dress shoes. Styles were basically unchanged from 50 years ago. If a guy was short, that was just too bad. There was nothing he could do. He stood, feet together, slowly running his left hand against the soft Angora at his thigh, staring at his reflection, yet not at the same time. Would he still feel the urge to wear these clothes once Dr. Speck's removed the hypnotic suggestion? Was this all a hypnotic suggestion and nothing more? Or was there something to what Stephanie had said about a person not being able to be hypnotized into doing anything he doesn't really want to do? Was there a part of him that really wanted to live his life in makeup, skirts, dresses, and high heels? He could only let time tell. Michael was so lost in thought that when the door abruptly opened directly in front of him to admit Chuck, his supervisor. A small group of men in suits followed closely after him like ducklings behind their mother. Michael didn't even react at first. He merely stared at them with a dazed, doe-eyed expression on his face, with his dark painted lips slightly parted as they walked by. The balding man started to make his way into the room and started talking quickly without looking. "Mike, sorry for barging in on you like this. This is Mr. Stevenson from the Freidman Corporation and these are his sales reps. They walked in this morning and wanted to see what kind of ad ideas we had come up with on there for ladies only fitness and dash." The supervisor finally got a look at who he was talking to and almost piled in his guests as he automatically began to back out of the office, apologizing. "Oh, pardon me, ma'am. We were looking for..." The supervisor trailed off, staring at his top salesman with a shocked expression. Only the foundation, finishing powder and rouge on his face kept the feminized Michael's own shock from showing. Years of sales experience and instinct along with a healthy dose of desperate inspiration took over. He turned calmly, presenting his most curvaceous side to them, then smoothed his dress. Then, adopting a sexy walk in his 4-inch black suede pumps, he approached the group of Freidman representatives. As he walked in front of them, he ran a lacquered finger over the men's chests. Slowly passing Mr. Stevenson, he reached the last rep. Michael came to a halt, turned and stepped in very close to him. He wrapped one nylon-clad leg around the man's pant leg at the knee and slowly brought it down until his pointed toe came to rest on the office carpet. Leaving it there, he grasped the man's tie from inside his suit jacket, slowly pulling him close as if to kiss him. Michael's head tilted slightly and his lips parted as in anticipation. He looked longingly down at the businessman's mouth. The Freidman rep had no clue what he was looking at, but it was obvious to the others present that he was aroused by the alluring woman with the long legs and great body. His eyes were wide and his breaths came in short and stuttering gasps. The rest of the group could only watch what was happening in silence. The sexual tension in the room was palpable. Just as the two pairs of lips were about to make contact, Michael said in his most masculine voice, "I'd do anything to get inside of For Ladies Only Fitness Center." There was a long silence. Nobody moved for several long seconds. Michael still stood centimeters from the man's face, holding on to his tie. His perfume filled his nostrils and his breath slightly touched the man's chest. "I love it." The spell was broken. "I absolutely love it," exclaimed Mr. Stevenson. Michael demurely stepped away from the flustered fragment rep and smiled brightly at the corporate businessman. Standing confidently in his high heels and Angora dress, he extended his hand to Mr. Stevenson. "Michael Warren at your service, sir," he said cheerfully. He gestured to himself saying, "I hope you don't mind my theatrics, but I've always been a firm believer in showing a customer what he's going to get instead of just telling them about it." He turned to the sales rep he had turned on. "Sorry for having to do that to you, but that's just the way I see the commercial going." Turning back to Mr. Stevenson, he said, "The way I see it is this. We send a message to everyone that your women-only fitness centers are so good, even men will want to join it. We can film it on location. What do you say?" "It sounds like a great idea," replied the exec. Chuck, still in shock, had yet to say anything. "Of course we'll have to find someone who looks better in a dress than I do," he said self-deprecatingly, lifting a shapely leg as if to emphasize his point. "Find someone who looks better in a dress than you do? I should say not. On the day we met, my wife didn't look as good as you do. Son, you had us all going, especially poor Johnson here. For a second I thought I was going to have to pour a bucket of cold water on him." They all laughed. "If you promise to be my leading lady in the commercial, you've got yourself a deal. If that's what it takes, you've got yourself a girl," Michael said beaming. They shook hands. Thank you all." As the Fragment Corporation executive exited the room sweeping up his entourage in his wake, Chuck finally recovered his composure. Eyeing their retreat, he quietly approached Michael. "I can't believe it. We were on the ropes with these guys and you turned it around. Mike, how did you know they were coming this morning?" "I mean, I didn't even know it myself till they walked through the doors." The two slowly stepped out of his office. Eyes stopped in curiosity, wondering who the new girl was. Chuck, he said sotto voce, crossing his arms under his breasts and shaking his head slowly. He shifted his weight and cocked his hip. "How else did I get to be your best salesman? Let's just say that a little birdie told me and I just made sure I was all made up for the presentation." "Made up is absolutely right. If I didn't already know it was you," said Chuck, "I would have been up on charges of sexual harassment. You look fantastic." They waved goodbye to the Fragment group from the doorway as they stepped smiling onto the elevator. "By the way," he continued, "where did you get this incredible idea? I mean, who could have imagined this?" Just then Melissa returned from the copy room with a large stack of papers in both hands. As she recognized her dress, light dawned in her brain. She dropped her load, sending papers everywhere. "Michael," she said. "Hi, dear. I hope you don't mind me using your dress this way," he said in his most feminine voice. It was pretty convincing. Then he leaned over and kissed Chuck firmly on the mouth, leaving a lipstick mark. She fainted dead away. Nobody else noticed. Michael had returned home that night feeling triumphant. He had opened his car door without a care and even waved jauntily at Sam as he made his way inside. Waiting for them on the answering machine was a message from Dr. Specs saying that he would meet them at the club that evening after his show was over. After his coup at the office, they decided to celebrate. They got changed and went out to dinner. Stephanie wore a red lycra top with a scoop neck and long sleeves, a tight gray skirt that showed off her rear, and red pumps with 3-inch stiletto heels. Large gold hoops hung from her ears while several bracelets jangled every time she moved her hand. Michael decided to wear the acid-wash stretch denim miniskirt with a tight white Angora sweater with 3/4-length sleeves. He wore pantyhose and matching white heels. He wore a delicate gold necklace with a heart pendant and the freshwater pearl earrings he had worn with the evening gown. His wife had made a gift of the ankle bracelet he now wore on his crossed leg. They now sat across from each other in a private corner of a Mexican food restaurant, picking at leftovers and sipping on margaritas. "I'm glad you've had a change of heart about wearing skirts and heels again," said Michael. "Hon, there was no way I was going to let you look better than me. More men were starting to look at you than at me." "That's just not right," she laughed. "Do you think you'll do all right in that TV commercial?" she asked. "I don't know. I should be out from under this hypnotism by then. I guess we'll just have to see how I do," he answered. "Looks aren't governed by the brain, girlfriend. I have a feeling you'll do all right." She smiled at him. "So how does it feel to know that in a couple of hours this will all be over?" He crossed his legs the other way and gently kicked his foot. He began to toy with the straw in his glass. "I don't know. I was thinking a lot about things today. I did this to myself and I didn't like it very much when it started, but don't know how I feel now." He looked into his margarita as if the crushed ice and liquor held answers for him. "I kind of like it now." Stephanie raised one eyebrow. "Kind of? Okay." He looked up at her and smiled. "A lot. I mean, look at guys. They don't get much choice in the clothes they wear. They can wear pants or shorts. They can wear a t-shirt or a collar. If a guy's short, too bad, he's out of luck because he can't change his height. I really have come to enjoy being 3 or 4 inches taller whenever I feel like it. I like listening to the sound my high heels make when I walk. I like wearing pantyhose. I like how they make my legs look. I like wearing skirts and dresses. I love my figure now. I don't know if I can go back to wearing men's clothes just like that." He looked down again. There was silence as Stephanie digested his words. "So don't," she said quietly. "Huh? I said don't. We don't have to see Dr. Specs. We don't have to remove this thing from you. You just kept referring to men as they and them. It seems that you've divorced yourself from the male gender. You've made up your mind. Don't see Dr. Specs." "Yeah, but what if all of this is just a hypnotic suggestion?" He poked at his breast. "What if my urge to wear makeup, skirts, dresses and high heels is nothing more than a joke? I've got to know the truth." She took her husband's hand and kissed it. "I love you. I don't love what clothes you're wearing or if you spend all day in my high heels and pantyhose. I wouldn't care if you decided to dress as a monkey. I love the you that's inside and I'll support you in whatever you decide." He looked at her with grateful eyes for several moments and then said, "I'm the luckiest girl in the whole world." Michael sat with his legs crossed nervously in the office of the club where everything had started. Dr. Specs had yet to arrive. They had waded through a virtual sea of people on the dance floor before finding Dino, the manager, who had led them to his private office. He still couldn't believe that this gorgeous woman sitting in front of him in the denim skirt and high heels was a man. After a few minutes he excused himself, muttering to himself about how life wasn't fair. Stephanie paced in the cramped office confines. The door opened, allowing in a blast of music. Dr. Specs walked through the door smiling at Stephanie. "I remember you. You were an exotic dancer with a thing for chickens." He laughed easily. She smiled back and accepted his extended hand. "What can I do for you?" "Dr. Specs," she said, taking Michael's hand and helping him stand, "please allow me to introduce my husband." He blinked. Speechless, he held out his hand. Sitting down again, Stephanie and Michael took turns narrating the story of how he was accidentally hypnotized into dressing in women's clothing instead of his wife. They included a few excerpts from their 2-week ordeal, including the day's encounter with the corporate executive. "How very strange," was his only reply. "What do you mean, very strange?" Michael asked, crossing his legs the other way and adjusting the hem of his miniskirt. "I mean that this is not normal." When the couple looked at him with sour expressions, he quickly went on to say, "People who are hypnotized in a secondary manner don't usually retain hypnotic suggestions this long. You are experiencing post-hypnotic release." Standing up, Michael said, "Can you translate that one into English for those of us who don't speak that language, Doc?" The hypnotist put his hands on the feminized man's shoulders. My dear boy, what I mean when I say that you are experiencing post-hypnotic release is that you are no longer hypnotized. A part of you that was repressed was given a chance to materialize in the real world. You maintain that it was my hypnotic suggestion that commanded you to dress and act this way, but no one can be hypnotized into doing something they don't want to do. The hypnotic suggestion probably died out a few days after I inadvertently put it upon you. He looked Michael up and down, spending a little more time than necessary on his legs. Tell me, do you feel pain when you undress any longer? Michael thought hard. Then a confused look came across his face. No. I don't feel any pain anymore. There's nothing I can do for you because there is nothing to do, my dear. The problem, as they say, is all in your mind, he chuckled. Maybe if you decide to stay like this, you should consider trading in your wedding band for something a little more feminine. Standing up, he shook their hands and bade farewell, leaving the couple alone with their thoughts. They sat in silence for a few moments before Stephanie broke the silence. Well, that's that. She went and leaned against the desk where her husband had sat down. What now? Michael sat down again and thought for several long minutes. So much ran through his brain: memories, feelings, urges, fears. What was he to do? He looked down at himself, feeling his earrings dangle against his neck. Breasts formed two very feminine mounds on his chest, pushing out the tight white Angora sweater. He had never thought much of his body before, but he liked the way his smoothly shaven legs looked as they emerged from the acid-washed stretch denim miniskirt. He enjoyed the sexy curve that high heels gave to his calves. It seemed right to wear makeup. He had never felt right before. Standing, he crossed the room to look at his reflection in the window. This whole incident had given him an opportunity to explore a different side of himself. It allowed him to give voice, as it were, to another person. Many times in his life, he had looked at himself in the mirror and wondered who the stranger was. He had never considered the man looking back at him to be truly him. But in the last 2 weeks, he hadn't felt that way at all. When he looked at himself as a woman, wearing a woman's clothes and smelling of a woman's perfume, he had felt complete. He turned his head slightly and the delicate golden necklace glinted in the light. His hand rose to touch it gently. Who was he now? He wasn't gay. He knew that. He loved his wife. There could be no other person in this world for him, but he couldn't be the man she fell in love with anymore. Even if he stopped wearing skirts and heels, he would never be that man again. The woman he was right now would always be looking over his shoulder, waiting to appear again. He had let the genie out of the bottle and she refused to go in again. Even more, he didn't want her back in again. The woman he was today was here to stay. He had to adjust for her in his life or he would never be complete again. In that moment, there was a shifting of time and place within Michael, of memories and dreams of what life was to be. The man and the woman within him readjusted their positions. The man, he was stepping aside and giving something of what he was, making room, while the woman, he had become, accepted what was offered without feeling the need to ask for more. Each shared a place in his heart and soul. He could make it work. His two halves could find a place in the real world, and if people couldn't handle that, it was just too bad. His wife loved and supported him. He was both male and female now, and it would not be right to deny an essential part of himself. A single happy tear fell from Michael's beautifully made-up eye as he bid farewell to his life as he knew it, and a small smile graced his painted lips. Gently wiping away the tear with a finger, he turned in his high heels. He turned to his wife, took her face tenderly in his soft hands and passionately kissed her. Her response was immediate and telling. She would love Michael no matter who or what he decided to be. As they broke from the kiss, he looked deeply into her eyes. "Let's go home,"